Okay, well, I'll kick us off, and while we're doing introductions and stuff, people can kind of filter in. So I'd like to welcome everyone and acknowledge that McMaster University, the host institution for the Research Data Center Networks, is located on the traditional territories of Mississauga and Haudenosaunee nations, and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Agreement. We begin this session by giving honor and thanks to the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations, and to recognize our responsibilities to respect and honor the intimate relationship Indigenous peoples have to this land. We encourage you to visit Native Land Digital, a space where people can learn more about the lands they inhabit, the history of those lands, and how to actively be part of a better future going forward together. And I would now like to introduce our speaker, Laura Gibson, no relation, we figured that out, from StatCan, who works closely with the Education and Labour Market Longitudinal Platform, which I keep wanting to stick the word linkage in there because that was what it was originally called. But we'll let Laura take it away. And if you have any questions, this is set up in a meeting format. We'll let Laura finish her piece, and then we will open the floor to anyone who wants to ask questions, however specific they might be or however general they might be, whether you're asking about plans for the platform going forward, specific questions about variables, and if Laura can't answer them, then I promise I will hunt her down until she gets back to whoever asked the question. So without further ado, take it away, Laura.
Great, thank you so much. So as introduced, my name is Laura Gibson, and I am an analyst at the Canadian Centre for Education Statistics at Statistics Canada. And today I will be presenting on the Education and Labour Market Longitudinal Platform, or we call it ELMLP for short, although it has had a few names as it's kind of grown, but I think this is the name we're going to stick with moving forward. So what we'll cover today, first I'll give an overview of the Education and Labour Market Longitudinal Platform. Then I'll give some tips for requesting ELMLP data in the research data centers, and then we'll have some time for questions. And before I get started, I'm just curious how many people in the audience today have ever already used any ELMLP data in the RDCs? If you could just raise your hand. I don't see any hands. Great, everyone's going to learn a lot today. So a good place to start is with what exactly the ELMLP is. So the Education and Labour Market Longitudinal Platform, or ELMLP, is an environment that allows the integration of anonymized variables from core education-related administrative sources with those from other selected data sets. The ELMLP is not one large integrated data set, but rather it's a relational data environment. And what I mean by a relational data environment is that rather than creating one record per individual with data from multiple sources, the ELMLP is made up of separate data sets that can be integrated using anonymized keys. This protects the confidentiality of individuals and ensures that the researchers have access only to the information that they need, while still vastly increasing the potential uses of our data holdings. The ELMLP is comprised mostly of administrative data sets, many of which are updated on a regular or semi-regular basis, and this allows for longitudinal cohort analysis. The way that the ELMLP is built is a reflection of how at StatCan data security is our highest priority. We deploy state-of-the-art tools and processes that prevent disclosure and ensure the confidentiality and privacy of individual data. Only aggregate non-confidential data are released outside of StatCan. So in the ELMLP, there are 3 core files that are updated on an annual basis. The first is the Post-Secondary Student Information System, or PSIS, the Registered Apprenticeship Information System, or RAISE, and then we have a T1 family file, tax file for any individuals who are found either in PSIS or RAISE. I'll describe these in more detail in a moment, but first I'll just note that if you are familiar with PSIS or RAISE, you might notice that not all the years are available in the ELMLP. This is because a certain level of completeness is required to construct files for longitudinal analysis, and generally more recent years have fewer data gaps. So the first core file is PSIS, Post-Secondary Student Information System, and it's available from the 2009-2010 academic year onward. The PSIS is a national administrative survey on enrollments and graduates of Canadian public post-secondary institutions, so it's public institutions only. PSIS collects information pertaining to the programs and courses offered at an institution, as well as information regarding the students themselves. And the information in the ELMLP is available from the PSIS cross-sectional files, which can be integrated or linked longitudinally. The second core file is the Registered Apprenticeship Information System, which is available from 2008 onward. The RAISE compiles data on the number of registered apprentices taking in-class or on-the-job training in trades that are either Red Seal or non-Red Seal, and where apprenticeship training is either compulsory or voluntary. It also compiles data on the number of provincial and interprovincial certificates granted to apprentices or trade qualifiers, also known as challengers. So a trade qualifier or challenger is someone who doesn't complete a full apprenticeship in terms of the number of hours and in-class training, but chooses to write the Red Seal exam and aims to pass and become certified based on like only their past work experience. The third core file is the T1 family file tax data for the PSIS and RAISE universes. And this file has tax records from 1992 onward. The T1FF, or as we sometimes call it, the TIF, is a source of data on income, tax credits, and deductions for individuals who have completed a T1 tax return and their dependents. So the T1FF file that's part of the ELMLP core files is limited to just the population of PSIS and RAISE. So to be found in the T1 family file of the core files, an individual must have been in PSIS or RAISE for at least one reference year. And I'll note that the ELMLP also includes other T1 family files that represent other populations. So for example, we have one representing elementary and secondary students in BC to go along with one of our other data sets. And I'll also just note that the number of tax records or number of years for which someone has tax records in the T1FF file is not limited to the number of years that they were in school. So if an individual is included in PSIS or RAISE for at least 1 year, all of their available tax records from 1992 onward will be included in the PSIS RAISE T1FF file. So just to recap, the three core files of the ELMLP are PSIS, RAISE, and then the T1 family file for PSIS and RAISE. So for the next sort of portion of the presentation, I'll go over some of what we call our supplementary files. And these files are considered to be supplementary either because they're provided by other groups at StatCan, so the census, for example, or the longitudinal immigration database. And then, oh, I hear some sound. Is there a question? No, okay, I'll continue. So yeah, supplementary either because they're produced by other groups at StatCan, and then we produce like concordance key files that can be used to integrate our data with theirs, or because they're provided to us from organizations outside Statistics Canada. So for example, we have a lot of data provided to us by Employment and Social Development Canada. And supplementary files are updated on a semi-regular basis. And I'll just note that the diagram or the kind of mind map that gets built starts to look a little wild. But I think for this audience, it's helpful to present the information this way because it does show the different ways that the files can be integrated with one another rather than just kind of presenting all the files in one list. And before I start with the supplementary files, I'll just say that there's two ways that files can be integrated with one another within the ELMLP. So the first method is when you're able to integrate one file with another, like one microdata file with another microdata file using a common anonymized ID variable that's present on both files. So this is the case for our three core files. So for example, if you were trying to integrate the PSIS file with the PSIS RAISE T1FF tax file, both of those data sets have the ID variable register group ID. So it's possible to merge those two data sets without a separate concordance key file. The second method is when a concordance key file is necessary. So if you're trying to merge two different data files that have different ID variables, so for example, PCIS and Census 2016 use different ID variables, you would need a third concordance key file that would allow the two files to be integrated. So as I mentioned, the three core files that we have, PCIS raise and the PCIS raise T1FF, all use the first method and don't need any extra keys. The supplementary files tend to be a bit of a mix. So if you're not sure whether you need to request a separate key for the files that you're looking for, you can always ask your RDC analyst and they'll be able to help you. So the first supplementary file I'll cover is the Census of Population. The ELMLP contains concordance key files between PCIS and raise and the 2016 census. And I'll just note that these keys are for the long form census only. So integration is only possible for up to 25% of individuals. And we also have concordance key files for Census 2021, which are coming in summer 2023 to the RDCs. The Longitudinal Administrative Data Bank, or the LAD, is available from 1982 to 2020. And it's a longitudinal file designed as a research tool on income and demographics. The value added of the LAD in the ELMLP is that it can be used to create control groups or do residual group analysis. So in most cases, this means looking at individuals who never enrolled in post-secondary education or an apprenticeship in Canada and therefore wouldn't be found in PCIS or RAISE or the associated T1FF tax file. The LAD only includes a 20% sample of the population. So if you're looking to include tax data in your analysis, unless you're looking for people who didn't enroll in post-secondary education or people who are not part of whatever population you're looking at, if there's a tax file available for that data set, it's always better to look at that one because you'll get 100% or close to 100% of the individuals. The Longitudinal Immigration Database is available from 1952 to 2021. It's also called the IMDb for short, and it includes administrative immigration data for all immigrants to Canada since 1952 and non-permanent residents since 1980. Outcomes for this population are available from tax files since 1982. Currently, we have one cycle of the National Graduate Survey integrated into the ELMLP. So the 2018 cycle of the NGS collected information from persons who graduated from public post-secondary educational institutions in Canada in 2015. The newest cycle of the NGS is currently in collection, and responses from the class of 2020 will be integrated into the ELMLP in coming years. The questions on NGS focus on academic path, funding for post-secondary education, including government-sponsored student loans, and transition into the labor market. Next, we have the BC Kindergarten to Grade 12 dataset, which is provided to us from the BC Ministry of Education. And we have data available from the 1991-1992 school year through the 2021-2022 school year. And this data set, like I said, is provided to us from the BC Ministry of Education. And it's a super interesting, useful file. Grant was saying that there's next month's talk is from BC with regards to this file. So I am keen to join in on that talk and learn a little bit more about this data set. And basically this data file includes person level information for students attending or who have attended BC's public and independent schools. The data include information about student characteristics, so gender, age, geographic location, etc., and students' progress through the education system. So there's information about graduation, foundation skills assessment results, course marks, exam marks, things like that. Also available as part of this project are a T1 family file, tax file for the BC K-12 students. We also have concordance keys between the BC K-12 students and the 2016 long form census, with a concordance key for the 2021 census coming soon. There's also a T1 family file for the parents of BC K-12 students, which can be useful for measuring the effect of parental income on pathways of children. That parent tax file was developed as kind of a separate project from our from the arrangement that we have with BC. So it's not regularly updated, whereas the BC file tends to be updated every kind of 1 or 2 years. We also have a few files that are not shown in this diagram. There's concordance key files between the BC K-12 students and parents and the records of employment file, as well as a concordance key file between the BC K-12 parents and the 2016 census. So there's lots of fun stuff available for the BC K-12 data. Next, we have the emergency and recovery benefits file, which includes information from March to September 2020. This data set is intended to cover the major income support measures that were offered to Canadians as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. So the most notable of those is the CERB. We have the Canada Student Financial Assistance Program, which is formerly known as the Canada Student Loans Program, which provides non-repayable and repayable student financial assistance, so grants and loans, to eligible students to help them access and afford post-secondary education. All provinces and territories participate in the CSFA, except Quebec, the Northwest Territories, and Nunavut, who receive alternative payments from the Government of Canada and then administer their own student financial aid. And this data set is provided to us by Employment and Social Development Canada. We also have data about the Canada Education Savings Program, or CESP. The CESP is a directorate within Employment and Social Development Canada that's responsible for administering the education savings incentives available to eligible Registered Education Savings Plan, or RESP, beneficiaries. The RESP is a savings vehicle used by individuals to save for children's post-secondary education. And this data set is also provided to us by ESDC. The Government of Canada offers the Canada Apprentice Loans, or CAL, to those registered in Red Seal apprenticeships who take block technical training. The loans help to cover the costs of apprenticeship training, and each individual can receive up to $4,000 per technical training period for up to 5 training periods. So we do receive some data about those loans from ESDC, and they are available from the years 2015 to 2022. Similarly, we also receive information from ESDC about the apprenticeship grants. So we have information from 2007 to 2022. And there's 3 types of grants included in that file. There's the Apprenticeship Incentive Grant, or AIG, the Apprenticeship Completion Grant, or ACG, and the Apprenticeship Incentive Grant for Women, or the AIGW. We have the National Apprenticeship Survey, which is a survey conducted by Statistics Canada. We have one cycle that's integrated with the ELMLP, so that's the 2015 cycle. And the National Apprenticeship Survey is a survey that looks at factors affecting the completion, certification, and transition of apprentices into the labor market. We also have a concordance key file between PCIS and RAISE and the Employment Insurance Status Vector, which is an administrative data set that follows the trajectory of employment insurance claims and benefit payments from application to termination. And it's available from 2007 to 2021. And then last but not least, we have the Survey of Approaches to Educational Planning, or the SAPE. The SAPE gathers information from parents and guardians about the strategies they use to prepare for their children's post-secondary education, their financial plans for paying for their children's schooling, and the barriers to saving for higher education. I'll note that only the 2020 cycle of the Survey of Approaches to Educational Planning has been integrated into the ELMLP so far. And since the children were between 0 and 17 years old at the time of the survey, the integrated use of SAPE at this time is quite limited. It'll become more useful in future years when more of those kids get older and actually enroll in post-secondary school or apprenticeships. So, as a recap, the Education and Labor Market Longitudinal Platform is not a large integrated data set, but rather it's a relational data environment. It uses unique anonymized IDs to allow integration of data files while protecting confidentiality. The 3 core files, so the PCIS, the RAISE, and the T1 family file for PCIS and RAISE, are generally updated in March of each year, and several of the concordance key files are also updated on an annual basis. And then the supplementary files and some of the other concordance key files are updated on an ad hoc basis. There's a few other databases that can be integrated within the ELMLP, but that's generally done on a cost recovery basis. So when it comes to ELMLP data in the research data centers, we currently have 89 active ELMLP projects in the research data centers. There are 73 researchers that are using this platform from 30 different federal, provincial, and territorial government agencies, post-secondary institutions, and other research institutions. And if you are interested in getting a full list of these projects and their titles and their researchers, we publish a quarterly newsletter for the MLP, and there's a regularly updated list of all those projects there. So if you're interested in getting on that distribution list, please let me know. It's a shameless plug. So next, I thought I would just cover what happens to a proposal when I submit it. So if you submit a proposal to get access to any of the MLP data files, it goes first to an initial review by our data access division. The data access division does many things, but they manage the contracts with researchers, and they also manage the staging of the data files and placement in the RDCs. So after the initial review from data access division, the proposal is sent to subject matter for approval, and this can take 1 to 2 weeks generally. Depending on the files that are requested, your proposal may be reviewed by up to 4 teams in the Canadian Centre for Education Statistics. So access to the post-secondary student information system, the registered apprenticeship information system, the other LMLP concordance key files, and like T1 family file tax files, and other surveys like the National Graduate Survey are all assessed independently by different teams. And then we coordinate to provide an overall approval. And this allows us to ensure that you've requested the optimal data sets for answering your research questions. And it also allows each team to provide specific comments about variables or concepts that you've discussed in your proposal. Any other data sets that are required that are not part of the MLP or not education related, such as like census, the IMDb, or the LAD, those are all approved by the teams responsible for those data. So I'll cover what the criteria are for approval. The first 3 are the most important, and the 4th is kind of a footnote. But first of all, you have to have clear research questions. So generally, to have access to data in the RDC, you have to have a clear goal of what you want to do with it. It's not really designed for people to like poke around in the data and see what they can come up with. So you kind of have to have a clear idea of just what research questions you want to answer when you're applying. Obviously, if you don't have access to the data, there's some wiggle room there, but we just generally want to avoid kind of looking and seeing what there is. And that's, you know, because we take confidentiality very seriously. So we want to make sure that people have a clear goal for what they're using the data for. The second is that the proposals generally should be describing or including a minimal number of descriptive tables. So kind of the spirit of the RDC is to provide access to microdata so that people can do complex analysis. So generally that's like multivariate analysis. Most of the projects that we see come through are doing some sort of regression analysis. If your research goals are looking to, like if you're looking to produce a large number or a large number of descriptive tables or like very large tables, those types of projects can often be redirected to custom tabulations where we would work with you to establish what your needs are, and then we would develop those tables for you for a fee. And then the 4th note is that researchers outside Canada must have a collaborator at a Canadian institution. This happens pretty rarely, but every once in a while we'll have a request from like a graduate student who is completing their degree at, let's say, an American institution, but they would need to have a collaborator in Canada because our data can only be accessed in Canada. So they would need to be in Canada to access the data and do their research, and you would need a collaborator at a Canadian institution to do that. A few other tips. you must provide justification for each data file that you request. So if we don't know why you need a specific data file or how it's going to be used, we can't provide access. So usually the clearest way to do that in your proposal is just to list them one by one and say exactly what you're going to do or why you need each data file to answer your research questions. And the last thing is, kind of as I mentioned earlier, if you are looking to request 2 integrated data files and those files require a concordance key, you would need to request each of those, the microdata files. So you would need to, for example, request PCIS and the Census 2016 microdata. And then you would also need to request the concordance key file that connects those 2 files, if there is one. So like I said, if you're not sure whether you need to request a concordance key file, you can always ask your RDC analyst and they'll be able to figure that out for you. That brings me to the end of my presentation. If you're looking for more information about the ELMLP, I've highlighted a few resources here. The first is an overview document that's available on the StatCan website that covers all the different data sets that are included in the ELMLP. And the second is a website you're probably familiar with, which is the data available in the research data centers. So you can filter the search by ELMLP and it'll show you all the data files that we have. And then the third is a document that's currently, it's only available to researchers who already have access to our data in the RDCs, but we've recently developed a user guide, which has some more information about like how to actually merge the files using the keys and things like that. And if you have any other questions, you can either ask me now, or you can always email me at my email address on the screen. And I'll also provide a copy of the slides as well for anyone who's interested.
Okay, thank you, Laura. See some applause. Very good. Okay, so here's the open mic part of the open mic. If you've got a question for Laura about the data or what you just heard, or your research or whatever, please unmute, turn your camera on. Let's have a discussion. If you do, if you're unable to do that and you want to put it in the chat, I'm happy to read out questions for people that are on the train or what have you. Laura had mentioned the BCK12 open mic. It's not coming soon, but well, it's not next month, but it is coming soon. It'll be probably January of next year. We have a question from Steve. Steve, I don't hear you. And Laura, you're muted when you go to answer. So, well, there we go.
There we go. There we go.
Hi, can you hear me now?
We do.
Perfect. Laura, thanks very much for the presentation. That was great. So I have a project with the ELMLP. I'll be starting soon, hopefully. I'm just away on vacation right now out of the country. I did have a question though. I'm just wondering, is there any linkages that are planned or being thought about in terms of linking the ELMLP to any of the business microdata, either the seed or the beam?
I don't think so. I think there was some talk at some point about possibly integrating it with seed, but I don't think there's any real moves on that front. I'm not sure. Christine, do you know any more about that? Whether that's still...
I think there are some restrictions on actually having the business data in the RDC. I would have to talk to an RDC analyst to know more about that, but at the moment, nothing has been put together for business and ELMLP in the RDC.
Yeah, so we have our own version of the file, the beam, that is in the RDC now, but I don't think I haven't heard of any plans to make a linkage key between those two.
I'm sorry, my headphones just fell out. If you had something directed to me, I just missed it.
No, it wasn't. It was just a comment.
Okay, okay, perfect. Yeah.
Anyone else with a question? There's a lot to digest. It's a big picture. So
it is, yeah.
we will have the recording of this to be posted from our YouTube channel. It'll be on the resources tab on the ELMLP page on our website, the CRDCN site. Okay. Well, I see a hand. Christine, have a question.
Sorry, yeah, I was just thinking about the business data. I can't remember if the diagram has been updated, Laura, to show that we've got keys between pieces raised and the employment insurance status vector.
Yeah.
It's not, it's labor market related business data, but it's, yeah, I'm not sure exactly what's being sought, so.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to ask a more sort of general question. You know, when ESDC or somebody does put in more data into StatCan, what's the process for deciding what gets added to the ELMLP? How do you decide how to prioritize and what to put in the platform?
I mean, at the moment, it's not so much that if someone wants to bring data to the platform, we end up saying no. Generally, if we say no to a project, it's because we already produce some sort of estimate that could like stand in the place of whatever linkage is being proposed. Or sometimes if it's like a cost recovery project, like if someone is bringing us data and the costs don't match up with what they were hoping, that can stop a project. But generally we're pretty open, particularly with data coming from ESDC. Like ESDC is our biggest cost recovery client. They play the largest role in funding the platform. So basically anything that comes from ESDC, we do our best to add it to the platform.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And if I was going to, so the IMDb has been linked to other things. Like it's been linked to the CCHS, it's been linked to I'm gonna forget the name, but the longitudinal landing survey. If I were to, so I saw you mention the IMDb, but if I were to request the linkage between like the IMDb and the landing survey, and then, you know, the PCIS race platform, would those keys match up, or is that a separate file that wouldn't work with the ELMLP?
It would depend, like our data have not been integrated with the landing survey specifically. Right. It's possible that if both are integrated with IMDb that it could be possible. However, that would be because all of the data sets in the ELMLP are covered under like a record linkage agreement, which has been approved by our upper management to say that there's justification for integrating these different data sets for certain research objectives. So if someone was interested in integrating with another data set that's either, I mean, if it hasn't already been integrated, then that's another thing because there would be costs associated with doing that work. But if it is possible to integrate different files based on the existing keys, it would require like a more in-depth proposal that would need to be, I think, approved by more people, just because that's outside of what's defined in our record linkage agreement.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That strikes me as being pretty important, so good to know.
Yeah. And that's all like something else that we look for as well when we receive proposals. It's just making sure that people aren't trying to integrate our data files with other data files that are not authorized to be integrated with them.
We're getting a thumbs up from Christine, so
yeah. And a hand. Go ahead, Christine.
Actually, yeah, sorry, I pressed the wrong button. Yeah, I agree with Laura. The other thing is if there's additional work that has to be done, like updating the record linkage agreement stuff, there may be fees associated with that. Mm-hmm. So it's just to be aware of it all would have to be discussed and looked at.
So going back a bit to my earlier question, it does seem like, you know, the people in charge of the platform are pursuing some of the linkages on their own, right? I mean, when this was originally conceived, it was 3 data sets and there was like, you know, we're going to link in census, but we're interested in hearing from the research community what else. And now we know we saw that giant diagram with like 50 50 things in it, plus you know, a bunch of admin data. So obviously there's work at StatCan to expand this platform and to make more things happen. So I'm kind of wondering what the process is for that, or is it like there's no more budget to expand this thing anymore? It's just going to be some updates. Is that the idea, or is there still expansion?
I mean, there's definitely still expansion. It's just depends on what your goals are. And generally, if you're bringing data to us, like from a provincial ministry, for example, or you're looking to have data incorporated into the ELMLP that haven't already had linkage keys developed, there would just be fees associated with that.
Can I push one more button?
Yep.
Most of our users are academics who are kind of free at the point of use and are taking a lot of this as given. There's not always budget for like a research proposal to link, you know, some social survey or whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering about what's going to be free and what the process for that is, in terms of things that you pursue that make their way to the RDC program eventually.
So the way it works with cost recovery projects is that generally, if you are funding the production of a file for the MLP, eventually it becomes accessible to all RDC users. So the ones that I've presented today are already available in the RDC, and there would be, like, outside of whatever cost might be associated with like actually accessing the data, there would be no cost associated for us to do any work because they're already there. If you're bringing a new file, then we would have to prepare a costing estimate based on the complexity of the linkage and how long we expect it might take. There's also like costs that are associated with developing documentation and things like that. So obviously that can sometimes be limiting for people, like especially I think for academic researchers who don't have a ton of money lying around to do this. So we are open to like people collaborating to like pool money together if they're trying to work toward a common research objective. Unfortunately, the costing structure right now is shifting a little bit not in the bad direction, and that the costs are increasing. But we expect that it'll probably continue to evolve over the next year or so. So it's kind of hard to say how much things cost. I see Megan has her hand up. Megan is a colleague of mine as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, so while, like Laura said, for the sort of average academic, it might be difficult to bring in a data set that they have and want to get it linked into the ELMLP. Also, like she said, that there are data sets being added. There are some that are just updates from provincial ministries. Sometimes ESDC wants to bring in like another survey or another piece of information that Statistics Canada already has and then add it into the platform. So it is continually growing. It's just whether if you want to bring something entirely new in, then that has cost. But also, I think it's important that once something is in, sometimes there's an exclusive access period, but then it does become available to everybody else. So like that's how BC worked, and that's how some of these other ones worked, is that once the work is done, then it's sort of available to the larger research population.
ELMLP is really a cost recovery program. It's funded completely by cost recovery. So.
Okay. Right,
and I will note that, oh,
sorry, go ahead, Laura.
I was just going to add that sometimes if there's something that you're looking for and you don't know if our existing data sets will meet the need, you can always write to us and ask. There was like a case recently where like someone was looking for a specific variable on a file, like on our T1FF tax file that we update every year. And so for them to add to have the variable added immediately, there would have been cost to the researcher, but if the researcher can wait until our next annual update, then we can incorporate that in the update next year, and then it's no cost to the researcher. So it really depends on what they're asking for. So no, don't hesitate to write to us if you have questions.
Perfect.
I'm just going to add on to that. And also don't hesitate to write to us if you're not sure, because there's a lot of data sets and in that example, we found that they didn't actually need a new linkage at all, that they already had access if they use something else that we had. So if there is a specific connection that researchers are trying to make, just ask us and we will find out if it can be done with the existing data set. Maybe, maybe not, but it's always worth it to reach out to us.
Okay, so we do have a question in the chat about whether there is a structural file or dummy data for the ELMLP that exists.
Unfortunately, there is not, simply because it's quite a complex platform with many different data files. So at the moment, no. And I don't think there are any plans to do so, just because there would be so many different permutations of what we might need to produce. So unfortunately, no. Thanks for the question.
Okay, well, not wanting to keep people here if there's no more questions. We'll have like a last call for the remaining attendees, or if there's any other comments from the StatCan group. Last minute thoughts. Okay, well, I hope everyone has a marvelous Tuesday, and we will see you at the next one, which I believe is the Canadian Survey Series. But you'll have to check to find out, because I don't have it with me right now, but I can look.